Also have our legislative assistant and our city clerk. And I would ask everyone to please stand for the pledge. And Councilmember Gully, how about you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bro, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I'll take a roll call. Councilmember Gully,
I'm here.
Councilmember Figueroa.
He's attempting to Zoom. I think Maria's
He has to
in the
give us a
process.
heads up in the
Well,
future.
he's been detained at work, so he's
Gotcha.
trying to double duty.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm here from Council District 3.
Councilmember Steele is here. Councilmember Mims. Present. Councilmember Conley Wilson. Present. Councilmember Sorienta. Here. Council President Mantello is here. We're awaiting on Councilmember Figueroa, so we'll wait a minute before we get into the presentation.
Yes, yes.
Mhm. While we're waiting, I would like to ask the council, I have a request and I think it's absolutely a prudent request by our comptroller. As all of you know, next Thursday, we have our finance meeting, our monthly, to prepare for the November council meeting. Since the comptrollers don't have legislation and we have law that night also, the comptroller has a request. I think it's a good idea to move that, and I'm hoping you're good with it. Councilmember Steele, because you're chair of law, and I'm hoping everyone's good with it. So the 25th, Tuesday, same time, 6 o'clock. So bear with me. That would mean. Bear with me. So we were looking at law at 5:30, finance at 6 o'clock on the 20th. So if we can move that to Tuesday, October 25th, same time, 5:30 and 6 o'clock.
I'm not in town.
You're not in town. Okay. We can move law. Oh, you can't do finance that night either.
Unless I'm allowed to Zoom.
Yeah, are you out of town? That's the thing. I think the public meetings, well, that's great.
Am I the only one who can't make it, or does Jim also having?
Well, I'll be coming back on Tuesday, I just don't know what time.
What about the 27th, the Thursday? Can you do Thursday?
No.
That's OGS and DPU.
No, I got the 26th
26th
is GS. Yeah, Wednesday.
I could do the I think so.
What's the reason
you-
for not keeping it on the 20th?
Because Andy has a number of pieces of legislation. He will not have time to get them drafted and for next Thursday, because don't forget, we have to get the packet out. So to get the packet out, to get the legislation done, he won't have enough time.
Council President,
So,
Councilmember Figueroa has joined us.
awesome. Councilmember Figueroa, thank you. So we have 7 present. So would it be feasible for all to move it to the 27th? Is that all right?
Same situation for me.
Same.
Council President, is it for both the law and finance to move it to the 27th?
Yes.
Okay.
Law and finance.
Correct. We
So-
can do law, another night. That's a quick budget meeting. It's a half hour at best. So we could, but, obviously the finance, we, want obviously everyone at the finance, because that prepares us for the November 3rd meeting. Bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, so the 26th is GS. It's just crunching to get the legislation done. Can you zoom? Can you zoom? Yeah. Okay. Would you prefer the 25th or the 27th? Okay. How about, since Jim is heading back on the 25th, we'll do the 27th, if that works. Okay,
For both.
Is that okay with you guys, Andy?
27th?
We'll go with that.
Yeah. And then Maria, you will get the legislation, obviously not this week, for next week. Okay, we'll get it next week for the following week.
And so then no meetings on the 20th.
Correct. Okay,
And the 27th.
they'll be moved a week later to the 27th. They'll be moved a week later to the 27th. So law, and I'll send the notice out. So law will be moved to 5:30 on October 27th, and finance will be moved to 6 o'clock or following law on the 27th. And then the packets, instead of getting them this Friday for next week, gives Andy another week. We'll get them out by the 21st for the following week. Okay? Okay, and I'll get the notices out to change that.
So then we have a light week next week.
So the 26th and 27th will be long nights, but then next week you'll be a little freer. So, okay. All right. So back to our budget. This kicks off the first of many, many meetings, as I mentioned. And tonight, just for the new members, we'll be going through the revenues, the appropriations. Andy has a really good presentation. If you have questions, I would just ask as normal, go through the chair. And we'll also be going through a number of departments, including the city council, city clerk, and other departments I mentioned. So Andy, take it away and thank you.
Okay. So the presentation is intended to look at basically broken out into 3 categories. The first is an overview of what I'll call citywide expenditures, which cross all 4 operating funds. Debt service, which is in the debt service fund pursuant to the approval of that ordinance last Thursday. Pension, health insurance, and then other categories. An overview of general fund spending and revenue sources. I would request that questions pertaining to the garbage fund, water fund, and sewer funds are held until the respective budget hearings, so that staff is here as well to answer them. And a very brief review of the New York State property tax calculation, lining out how we ended up underneath the property tax cap limit. Before I jump into it, I do want to thank all the city department heads this year who met more than usual. I can say this is, if not the second hardest, this was the single hardest budget to put together in my 10 years at the city, not even when I was working for Joe Mazzarella. We're going to get into why very soon with the debt, the pension, the health insurance, along with everything else, as to why this was so difficult with all of inflationary costs on one side and then mandated increases on the other side, which is what made it so difficult. So to get into it, I think it's important when start to talk about debt is to look back at where we have been to understand where we are going. The philosophy that we have had, that I've had in issuing debt for the city has been, we've talked about it briefly before, is to issue short-term bond anticipation notes until the project's completed or the purchase is made, and then converting it to long-term debt at a time when it was most advantageous to the city for interest rates. This line graph shows the history of bond anticipation note interest rates that we were receiving from the January 2018 issuance to the issuance we just closed on September 15th. There's two lines on the graph, as you can see. The line in blue is the interest rate. The red line is what is referred to as the effective interest rate. The difference between those two lines is the city was receiving premiums at its issuance, where in the simplest terms that I can, investors were buying the notes at 3% to sell them to, for example, if Jeffries bought the note, they were going to resell the note to investors. They would bid 3% as what's called the coupon rate so they could resell it to their investors. However, because of the interest rate market, and our notes follow the prime rate. So right now, when the Fed is increasing rates, that's the basis of what we were getting. We were receiving a premium that reflected the current interest rate market at that time. So for example, in January of 2018, the coupon rate that was won by bid was 2.75%. The city paid interest of 1.71%, and we received payment for the difference. The intent of showing this is to show that the rates were going down gradually between the two, going from 2.75 up to 3 and hitting a low mark of 1% in January of 2022, all while receiving premiums. And then, as everyone knows, like a snap of a finger, the rates skyrocketed. In addition to that, we did an issuance, as you can see, in September, where there was no premium. So as the mayor put out in his message with the budget, the debt service costs have increased substantially, driven by the interest rates, but we are also receiving less premium. The effective interest rate is what is hurting the city when it comes to debt service costs in the 2023 budget. Are there any questions on this slide?
I think it's not good news, Andy.
No, but we have a plan.
I know.
So the table is meant to illustrate in simpler forms. It's looking at what the interest, the coupon rate and the effective interest rate was for each issuance in January, and then the July issuance of this year. So you can, to illustrate the spike that we have seen. And as everybody knows, interest rates have gone up again since July. I've talked consistently with fiscal advisors. We always have about the best strategy moving forward. The intention at this time, and is what is currently planned for in 2023, is to keep everything on short-term debt with the hope that interest rates will level. That may be optimistic, but the leveling of the Fed, it's twofold. If the Fed stops raising rates, but also the volatility in municipal bond markets dies down. It's a twofold because the municipal market started to move before the Fed started raising rates in 2022. The other goal is to leave flexibility in financing options for our short-term debt. What that means is bond anticipation notes generally can only be issued for 5 years. There's a caveat to that. If 5 years is most of our short-term debt, to pay off short-term debt instruments that are approaching the 5 years to avoid having mandatory serial bond issuances. Then to just have the flexibility so that if the market settles, we can go to long-term. Waiting to go to long-term has something we have employed. We went to long-term in January of 2020 and did not go back to long-term until January of 2022. Luckily, we did move a lot of debt to long-term that needed to get to long-term in January. So we did do a conversion at that time, which bought time to avoid the mandatory long-term debt issuance. The 2023 city debt payments, these would be 600 and 700 account codes. What you'll see is a letter that designates the fund. The first range of numbers is the department. The second grouping of numbers is the type. These would be the types of 600 or 700. 600 is principal, 700 is interest. In 2023, city, all four funds combined will be making debt payments of $6.5 million, $4 million of principal, $2.5 million of interest. Payments will be made out of the debt service fund, and the debt service fund revenues will come from 2022 premiums that were received to offset the interest cost. That is in accordance with New York State law. When you receive a premium, you must set it aside and use it the following year to pay down the debt, pay down the interest on the debt. Unused debt proceeds, we sweep capital project accounts on an annual basis for if it was anticipated, something would cost $1 million and it costs $950,000. We sweep the $50,000 and use that to pay down the debt. And then there's transfers out of the four operating funds for the remaining balance of the debt payments. This is a new concept that is in this year's budget. It removes debt payments out of the general water, sewer, and garbage funds and puts in the debt service fund. It is at the request of Bonadio, and it is consistent with what other local governments and school districts do.
And Andy, has this been done before? I mean, is there precedent for this?
For paying a debt service, I have done it at other places
You have.
for 6 weeks.
Ah.
Do you mean that or do you mean the sweep?
Actually both, but I was talking the latter, but the sweep, I mean, that has been being done, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So
I
we
think we're being more aggressive.
will be more aggressive in paying. Not that we have not been aggressive in paying down. It's just going to be much more aggressive in we've talked about in the past where if it's a construction project and that we're told $2 million, we may try to, can we get by at 1.5 or 1 3/4 and look at it at that avenue and really pin down delivery dates of equipment and things of that nature. It's also a consideration going into the 2023 capital plan, certainly.
All right.
And is part of the conversation that we'll have at that budget hearing as to what the thinking is behind funding the needed equipment and things of that nature.
And reimbursements, I mean, that's huge
Correct.
because many of our projects are reimbursed. So.
So we're staying on top of those.
Andy, do you have, I was going through, I don't know, one of the old budgets looking for last year's notes, and I came across a really awesome chart that you did on bands. obviously you can't, update that immediately with everything on your plate, but it seemed to be really helpful.
We can look at putting that together.
Okay. Does anyone have questions or,
Chair.
yes, Council Member
I guess,
Kelly.
listen, I apologize, I'm probably
Yeah.
just confused on this, but you say you debt service fund revenues come from the four major sources, and you mentioned garbage. I thought when we set up the garbage, that fund, the money that went in the garbage would cover the services there, but there wouldn't be any money to take out of there. The
So,
sanitation was set to just, enable itself in its own department.
so what, the easiest way to think about it, in this across all four funds, there used to be a department CL.9730.600. That's CL's garbage, 9730 is bond anticipation note, 600 is principal. In 2022, that could have been $100,000. 2023, instead of that account being $100,000, it's now an interfund transfer out to the debt service fund. It's the same, the net does not change on this. It's just a different way to account for it.
Jim, it is, I'm sorry, Councilman Gully, it is debt of the garbage fund. So if we make a capital acquisition like a garbage
Alright,
truck,
so
for example, or a
debt
sweeper.
sanitation-
Yes, yep.
Alright.
There's no commingling.
No,
Just-
well, I
it
just
flows
way it
through
came
one
out,
account.
we're just gonna, drive service funds from four revenues, four operating funds. There's a little clarity is nicer, but that, thank you.
So the benefit of doing this is twofold. One, it'll be simpler to split out. When you see the quarterly report.
Yeah.
Instead of everything above interfund transfers now is for operations. The other benefit to it eliminates a lot of redundancies that we do in our office for tracking this. All the debts tracked on a litany of different spreadsheets, broken down by fund or by project or by type. If that exists currently, then we can, then the general ledger itself, just aggregate debt all together in one spot. And then it's how much did the city pay in total for interest on serial bonds in a year, and just be able to go in and look at it immediately and pull the number.
All right, thank you.
I guess, the big thing, Andy, this is obviously a short-term, but also a long-term vision. I mean, do you anticipate next year, obviously doing something similar? Because we know that that the economic situation may continue next year.
In regards to
Just the.
that in general,
Yeah.
we're certainly looking at it we've always looked at it in a long lens. It's never been short-sighted, I would say. Is there an enhanced analysis going on? Yes. What we'll do is, and to some degree, we've already started it specifically for the January issuance, is run the issuance on two tracks, exclusively short-term and a mix of short-term, long-term. We'll never just put everything out on long-term. And then once we get up to the sale date, we can pivot it if it's needed. So if interest rates flatten and fiscal advisors says, recommends that we should start looking at long-term debt, it will be built that it can immediately be switched over to the
Andy, I
long-term debt.
apologize. There is no sound on YouTube.
Can you start over?
Huh. Okay. Hopefully we'll find out. Let me see. Oh, it's warm in here.
He's gonna go check it out. Let's continue.
And Andy, we're also looking at debt that has not been issued, correct? And those potentially we won't authorize, or they're authorized, but you won't issue them? Or is pretty much everything-
Potentially, it would, to make that decision, would have a lot of factors into it. What I think the more realistic and plausible option that will be brought before the council will be if there is a project that last year at this time was anticipated to begin in March of 2022. We would have issued $500,000 in short-term notes. If that project has not started today, we should take that $500,000 and pay down that debt and eliminate it.
Mhm.
What that would result in, if you have a $2 million project on a bond resolution and that $500,000 has been issued and we pay it down, that leaves $1.5 million on the bond resolution the rest of the way. If the project still is going to occur, a supplemental bond resolution would be brought forward to reset that $500,000.
Which we've done, I do recall a couple.
We've done supplemental bond
Couple.
resolutions, not for this type
No, no,
of situation.
no.
This would be a different means to do it. It is acceptable under finance law. I've consulted with bond counsel already on that. That is an avenue that we are looking at taking it for the January issuance. Any other questions around debt?
And, you know, Andy, what would you suggest in terms of, you know, but anything before the end of the year that you plan to present to the council, other than obviously what's in the budget?
At this time, I don't know of, outside of the capital plan, which again, we'll talk
Right.
about that night because
No.
it's not even a guarantee right now that those bond resolutions are coming forward. There are no projects that I know of as of this time that have bond resolutions coming before the end of the year.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Figueroa? Any questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Pension, which is the 804 code in every department. 2023, the ERS budgeted total, that's a pension for civilians, it's just under $2 million, an increase of $176,000 over 2022. PFRS, police and fire's pension, 7.7 million, an increase of just under 470,000 in 2023. Total cost, 9.7 million, an increase of $645,000. There is no pension deferral in the proposed budget. For those who don't know, those are 10-year loans to the New York State retirement system that there is a graph 2 slides from now that will show you where we're at with paying that back. Those are 10-year loans at variable interest rates, which certainly seem like they are adhered to the market. The
And-
cause of the increase is due to percentage. We budget based off of projections and estimates provided by the New York State Comptroller's Office. It is what they want to see as part of their budget review, which I will just note, there is a budget review by the state for 2023 that they have sent their list today and they will start tomorrow.
I was going to ask where that was in the process. And the whole pension deferral, if I recall, was done many years back, which kind of accumulated, we'll say, to some of the issues we confronted when you and I took office, Mayor. Is that
I
correct?
think it was deferred for maybe 6 years or so. And if memory serves me, we could look it up, but I think we had accumulated about $9 million in deferred pension payments. We've been steadily paying that down, and as Andy indicated in a slide or two, he'll give you the trajectory of that. But yes, we're not taking advantage of that. It is an option that's out there, but we don't like it.
Yeah.
Council President,
Yes, Councilmember Soriano.
are these figures based on the amount that would be due in December or in February?
February.
Okay. Can you provide me with like an estimate of what the amount would be if we did pay it in December versus what it is in February?
Yes, I can.
provide us.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
Um,
anything anyone asks for.
I'm only saying that because there is a significant savings.
It usually
do-
runs like $40,000-$50,000.
Yep.
So I can
Yeah.
put that will take time to do because of decisions made in prior years. Budgeting pension is not straightforward at the city.
Now, even though this is based off of the projected invoice that was just released probably like a week or two ago, we anticipate that this would be also reflecting the final invoice when it should be released in the next couple of weeks, right?
No, we budget out the projection and the estimate. That's what the state wants to say.
Right. But those figures should be the same though, hopefully.
One would hope.
Okay.
And Councilmember Soriento, I hate to put you on the spot. What's your, is there a concern or just?
No,
I
there's-
just don't know.
I'm only, yeah, so it's just a concern of thousands of dollars of savings. So the time frame. But I know that, this budget doesn't go into effect until January, so that's one issue, but if we could get this paid, basically, if we get that payment in before December, whatever the deadline is,
12-1.
it'll save the city thousands of dollars versus if we pay it in February.
We have done that in the past when cash flow permits, and my recollection is the savings is around 50,000, maybe as high as $60,000.
Okay.
But it will depend upon an evaluation of cash availability at that time.
Now, the savings of the 50,000, that's just for ERS, or is that combined with
I
PFRS?
think that's, if I remember right, combined between the two. The struggle we have with paying it in December, I would write the check if I could. It's cash flow.
Yeah.
The problem is we need state aid and we need sales tax. If you start backing up, we have special payrolls that run in October, November, December. Then that pension bill, we need state aid and we need sales tax to come in. State aid and sales tax are still running through the state before they come to the city. So we're not gonna write a check if the wire's not in, I'm not gonna write the check out to the retirement system, which is why I do not budget that December payment. Once the money's coming freely from the state, I'm gonna use the sales tax because it's confusing with the state aid. Once it's coming from the county to the city, then it's easier to be able to send a check out. And the bigger problem, quite honestly, is with the state aid, with no disrespect to the comptroller's office, that they're transferring it from different units at the state. And sometimes we've had to call,
Knock on their door.
yes, sometimes we've had to knock on their door over the years for a variety of things.
I recall one year it was Super League and they
Yeah.
were garnering interest, I believe, and there was a whole.
Somebody's couch.
Council President,
Yes, Councilmember Min.
does US Treasury allow ARPA money to be used to pay this ahead of time,
No, cannot use ARPA to pay pension bills.
even if it's reimbursed?
All right.
Next time.
So the
Thank
next slide shows the change
Yeah.
in pension contributions. What's up there is the top 6 tiers that we have employees in. And there's 2 tables, and when the years reference the bills. So the change in change in pension bills. And then we budget 75% of the bill due February 1st, 2024, and 25% of the bill due February 1st, 2023. That is a byproduct of a budgetary decision that was made in 2015. And what I was trying to show here is the rates dropped significantly from the 22 bill to the 23 bill, and are now, for some of them, the increase in the 24 bill is greater than the decrease. And for some of the other ones, they are pretty close. The rates are determined based off of an actuarial report done by the State Comptroller's Office. So for the February 1st, 2024 contribution percentages, that's an actuarial calculation based off of the financial market condition on March 31st, 2022.
And Andy, we still have some tier two?
We do.
That's, yeah, that's
Mhm.
back in the, geez, I want to say early 80s,
Mhm.
maybe? Late 70s,
They're
yeah.
designed differently though.
Oh, well,
ERS
police and
and
fire,
yeah.
that's true. That's true. I know tier four is not that old. Come on now, come on.
So here's the line graph showing the payback of prior year deferrals. So February 1st, 23's bill will pay back $707,000. 24, 709,000, and then the slide down for the remaining 3 years. For the new council members, last year, we actually paid off 3 of these loans. This was substantially higher before those paybacks were made in 2021. But it does inflate the pension bill materially on an annual basis. Mhm. Health insurance, which would be 805 codes in each department. Total cost increase in 2023 is just under $1 million, driven by 2 things. Cost increases in the city's premiums and premium equivalents. In addition to that, some departments had some significant changes of either employees who had not elected health insurance previously elect health insurance, or change from a single to a family plan. There's a department in the garbage fund that had over, I believe the budget, and if I recall correctly, the budget in 2022 was $300,000. 2022 is $300,000. 2024, it's $100 or $400,000 with a $100,000 increase. As you're reviewing the budget, if it does not look like an 8% increase, that is driven entirely by enrollment and what plan they are elected there in. And I had never seen a year with movement like this.
I have a couple highlighted in here as I was going through earlier today. I saw one, it jumped maybe 50K, one of the departments, and I'm like, why is that jumping so much? It's, similar personnel, but so the change has to do with single to family, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay.
The city self-insured plan through Highmark Blue Shield of New York, which is coverage for active employees and retirees under the age of 65, non-Medicare eligible retirees. The premium equivalent increase is 7.98% as calculated by the city's third-party actuary. Calculation is based only on the claims incurred by the city. It is not community rated. 7.98% is certainly material. There are other local governments who have the same or very similar benefit structures to the city of Troy. They have plans that are community rated. Their increases range from over 10% to over 15%. And the Medicare Advantage plan, which is through Humana, that premium increase was 1.8% for 2023.
Yeah, that's what I highlighted also, the employee contribution to health insurance.
Other multiple fund expenditure categories. One of my goals here was to talk about it now. You may hear department heads say a lot of the same things as they come through for their hearings. So just to get ahead of it now, permanent salaries 101 code. All salary increases that are in the budget are pursuant to contractual agreements and or policies approved by city councils. All vacant positions were reviewed. Many were either eliminated or have a deferred hiring date in 2022. If there is a substantial salary savings amount in the department on the personnel page, they probably have a deferred hiring.
I guess, one of my questions on that, Andy, and this is just overall. So we don't fill a position. Say, we can't find someone, et cetera. The position is not filled, but it gets that bump, but nobody's in it. And the person who potentially gets hired, say in a couple months, whatever, is getting hired at that bump instead of hired at the salary as the starting salary of being vacant. I guess when I was at Canal, we actually kept vacant positions. We did not bump them. We kept the vacant position at the salary, and it wasn't bumped because nobody was in it. And it was substantial savings because we had numerous labor positions that were vacant. Why do we bump vacant positions?
Bump the hiring date.
No, bump the salary. You know what I'm saying? So say like, right now we have a vacancy for communications in the mayor's office. It's still scheduled for a bump, even though it's vacant. Why are we not keeping it at the original salary?
So
Don't we
that
have
one in
that
particular,
choice?
that's non-rep. That was the decision of
I
the
mean,
mayor on that
we'll
one.
get to
So,
that, we'll get to
yeah,
that,
so
but-
some of them, so I have one. I have principal account clerk and yes, principal account clerk and 1315.
I saw that. one.
That's deferred until July 1st. That's an employee who was previously in that position is pending a test. So they would have the opportunity. I tried to say that hopefully they're reachable. If they are not, then they have the ability to retreat with their current salary there. So some of them are case by case basis. So that's why mine's that way. I deferred it out to July 1st, hoping that the test results are back. And then we'll make a decision from there as to filling that position once that person is reachable and passes the test. So they're on a case by case basis, a lot of them.
We're also still in the current market. So if a salary goes up, it's an acknowledgement that it costs a little bit more to get somebody as time goes on. It also keeps us consistent with the union contract. So we have vacant union positions. If the union is scheduled for an increase in a given year, even though that position may have been vacant for 6, 8, even 12 months, that position comes in at the scheduled position. So it's consistent across unions and non-rep employees.
Yeah, see, we were able to not have to bump. And obviously that was a different time. It's the state. I mean, are we mandated to hire, or is that a policy that we've established? You know what I'm saying? Like the bump, like why can't we hire someone at, the salary, the starting salary for that position rather than continuing to bump even though it's vacant? That's my point. You know what I'm saying?
Are there positions in the budget with step increases that are vacant?
Potentially, maybe that's. what
Okay,
I'm
well,
looking
I
at.
would have to look at it.
Yeah.
as departments
You'll
come up.
see a couple as we go
Alright.
through departments.
And we'll take, I'll look
Yeah.
at it tomorrow.
Thank
Council
you.
President.
Yes,
just wanted to
Councilmember.
No, so I think what you're referring to is, I believe it's the Schedule A for that's listed in the CSCA bargaining agreement, that there's a starting salary and then a step range. So under that specific title, that grade, it'll start at, okay, the 2023 rate, you start at this
Right.
amount. And then after 5 year or after 1 year, I don't,
It Still is.
Yeah, like
it's still
we-
that
we
way.
would
You get
give
like,
that
you get a
bump.
bump and then you
Right,
go
we
to the
would
next
give
step.
that bump, but that particular employee would go
Mhm.
through probationary period before getting that step or that bump.
Are you
That's
looking
what I'm
for a
saying.
non-union, like a salary
That
schedule
was
also for even
the
non-union?
CSCA,
Yeah.
At least in the state.
Oh.
And, it was a public authority, but I don't.
Okay.
It was just a question because I saw a few and I was curious.
A lot of them would be case by case, like my department, that one is
Okay,
to protect someone who has the right to retreat under civil service law.
okay. And I did have that one. Okay, thank you.
Insurance, 406, which is general insurance. There are significant increases across all four funds. That's being driven by the actual cost increases experienced in 2022, which we discussed earlier this year when we amended the budget, in addition to further anticipated increases in 2023 based off of recommendations from the city's insurance agent. This is what the increases we have seen are consistent with those being seen by all local governments. The insurance policy is being shopped to any possible insurance company we could think of and find.
It's amazing, huh?
So like so many other things, insurance is cyclical. We've enjoyed a relatively easy market for about 10 years. In early 22, maybe late 21, the municipal market started to harden, meaning rates were going up and coverage was going down. And in particular, insurers are nervous about dams, and we have a number of them. That's why we've been paying a lot of attention long-term, thinking about decommissioning dams that are legacy dams that have no use other than to hold water behind them. But we have a number of those. Long-term, the city needs to deal with those. We might consider a policy that excludes dam coverage, but that's a risk. It would be better to just dispense with dams that are no longer necessary. And again, it runs through cycles. We can expect a couple more years of hardening, and depending on commercial insurance losses or municipal losses, it may continue to go up. What will help us, though, is the body cams, having those deployed, having increased training for the police department. Those are things that the underwriters will look favorably on. That'll help us in a hard market.
And obviously, Mayor, we're looking, I'm sure, at other avenues to try to minimize our insurance risks, correct?
Oh, yes, we pay a lot of attention to risk management. But we're involved in a lot of, for lack of a better term, business lines, everything from public safety to street maintenance to trip and fall stuff. I mean, we run the gamut of risks. So yes, we pay attention to risk management, but we're also, municipalities are a favorite target of the plaintiff's bar. It's just the nature of the beast.
Materials and supplies, which are 300 codes, utilities, 401. Vast majority of those increases are driven simply by cost increases seen in 2022 and what is anticipated to be forthcoming in 2023. And finally, the 911 contract has a $100,000 increase from 2022 to bring the total to $1 million for 2023. And because I knew someone would ask, that is the last year of the $100,000 increases. The clause in the contract then says thereafter, on the anniversary of the effective date of each and every year, the increase shall be 2%. So.
And when does it expire? 24?
So they broke out through 2024 and then have that clause below it that says every year afterwards it increases by 2%. So I'll leave that opinion to come from Corporation Counsel.
Yeah. I think many of us are on the same page about that.
Has anybody explored any options?
I know there's been some low-level dialogue around a more regional approach, but nobody's really taken that bull by the horns. It's not something that we could do on our own. We need to be in with somebody.
Right.
And
Or shared
we have
program
but
that
one
would be-
option right now. So
Now we'll pivot to the general fund itself. Total appropriation, $79.8 million. This looks at expenditures by type. Wages, 42%, benefits, 33%, making up over 75% of the budget in 2023. I do want to note interfund transfers are 8.46. Councilmember Gully, that's where you see the transition from how we were accounting for debt previously that we talked about earlier. But there is no debt on this graph. The chart on this chart, it is now in interfund transfers. As you're reviewing the budget, again, it's fund.department.item. This chart looks at item. Wages are anything that starts with a 1. Benefits are anything that start with an 8. Equipment starts with a 2. Materials and supplies starts with a 3. Contractual services and contingency start with a 4. And interfund transfers start with a 9.
Would you say employee wage benefits? What do they start with?
8. Wages are 1. Benefits are 8.
Okay, thank you.
By department. And just so that everyone's aware, the departments on here do not reflect the department structure of the city's committees. Departments and the budget are defined by the state comptroller's office. General government support start with a 1. Public safety starts with a 3. Vital statistics starts with a 4. Transportation a 5. Culture and recreation a 7. Home and community services 8. Retiree benefits 9. Interfund transfers 9. The 2023 budget, any department that begins with a 3 makes up 58.21% of the budget.
58.1.
58.21%. At the bottom center of the page. I did put a footnote in the bottom right-hand corner of these pages so you can refer back to where they come from in the budget itself. Where revenues are coming from.
Andy.
Yes.
I apologize. I do not, and I can't believe it, have your presentation from last year. Do you know, off the top of your head, the percentages? How did they go up, go down per the department?
I can pull that up after the,
Yeah.
and I'm afraid it's gonna kick the whole PowerPoint
Yeah.
out.
I did take a quick look at that. There's not substantial change. I did not write down all the numbers. I do know that public safety, which is more than police and fire, by the way,
Right.
it includes code enforcement,
Traffic.
Traffic, et cetera. That saw an increase of 0.5%, 0.5%. Many of the others were of a similar magnitude. It was not a significant increase in any particular department. So we don't have anyone in particular to blame.
I didn't expect that, but I was just curious. And usually I have the PowerPoint from the prior year, but I can find it somewhere. Could be.
Revenues, property taxes make up 34.36%, local revenues 41.11%, state aid 16.38%. I didn't put much in about the revenues in the general fund. I'm assuming we, in a few minutes, will be going through them fairly in-depthly. So
Yep.
moving on to how the property tax rate was calculated. The revenue required from property taxes, which is total expenditures less the other revenues, is $27.4 million. A net tax overlay of $400,000. The tax overlay is a consideration of property owners who won't pay their property taxes. Total required tax levy is $27,823,514, leading to a tax rate of $15.41. It's an increase of 1.98% from 2022 on a property assessed at $150,000. That is $44.79 annually, or $373 a month. And finally, and I promise this will be very brief, but it's just one item of note for council members to be aware of. We are under the tax cap by $125,274. The tax cap is based on a local government's tax levy, not the tax rate. It also includes, so it's the city tax levy. It is your change in pilot revenue. It is city exemption removals, and it is also the bid assessment levy. So as changes, as amendments are possibly made, consider it, if it goes up, there has to be a consideration that there is an impact. It's not dollar for dollar because of the way that the bid assessment works. The bid assessment is 5% of the city tax rate. And under the enabling legislation for the tax cap, that then must get added back in. But we are $125,000 under the property tax cap for 2023.
And for new members, when the tax cap was implemented, immediately, we're over the tax cap. Andy started including these in the annual budget presentation, which is super helpful.
OSC will be verifying that in the coming days.
Yes. And I actually, the first year called OSC, remember? I'm like, wait a minute, are we under?
And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay. Now we get into the budget. And before getting into the budget, a really cool addition for any members in the public for future meetings, if you would like to come down or hybrid, at the beginning of each budget meeting, each of the chairs will open it up to the public to ask a question regarding that particular committee. So that's in our rules. We did add it to just be more open and transparent and really involve the public. So if someone does have a question, if we or the mayor or department head cannot answer that question, we will get you that answer, and the city clerk will send the answer to that question to the person requesting the next day or so. So stating that we do open it up now to the public. If you have any questions regarding the departments that will be reviewed this evening. Okay, we'll close the public forum part of this budget committee meeting. And, you know, Andy, I did write a couple things down regarding, I guess, you know, first and foremost, overall, you know, the mayor's message, et cetera, just overall for me, looking at it from 100,000 feet. Super pleased that we're under the tax cap and that we're not, at least in this proposed budget, is not proposing to exceed it. The vacant positions, I think we might be able to have a little wiggle room there, but as we go through departments, we'll know more. This is just me. The ARPA 2 mil, we will go over that tonight and as we move forward. So we'll talk about that. And obviously the reducing the debt is extremely important. Pretty much everybody knows my position on the garbage fee, and we'll get to that when we get to the department. You know, but one of the things that I saw in there also that was mentioned in the message was potential state aid. And, you know, I have not heard any potential of, you know, deferring state aid, et cetera. Have you heard anything, or was that just a potential, like, throw a warning sign out there?
That was a warning sign. And then I specifically didn't mention state aid, but all funding that comes to us from the state, which could include state aid, aid to municipalities. It could include CHIPS funding. It could include any of the various public safety grants, although they typically are federal dollars that flow through the state government. But I think it would be naive to think that the pressures we're feeling aren't going to be felt by New York State come the next budget cycle. So come January through April, they're going to be struggling. In times past, when the state was under fiscal pressure, aid to localities was either cut or threatened to be cut, and we had to advocate very forcefully for that. It was a different governor. This governor comes from a background of local government. So we are hopeful that there is more empathy for the position local government is in. And if it does come down to a crunch, that we won't see cuts to localities. But I think it would be naive to not think that something's going to happen at the state level and perhaps a federal level as well, except that they can get down the basement and print money. We can't, nor can the state. So it's not based on anything specific that I've seen, other than to say that I've lived long enough to live through these trends, and this is the beginning of something that I don't like the looks of.
And that's why I asked, just, I want it all out on the table. I want the public to, also understand, that it is more of a challenging budget than I think any of us anticipated. So, saying that, okay, moving forward, Andy, I did have a couple questions on page 6 and 7, if you don't mind. We could hit that right away, maybe,
Okay.
and just start going through. So, there's a lot of talk, and I guess even for the council to understand, obviously last year, the Troy Mac, it was $5.9 million. This year, no Troy Mac. So, let's explain just the impact that not having the MAC has on the 2023 budget. And I think a lot of people are thinking the MAC, we don't have it anymore. We should have millions of dollars. And I don't know how you equate that in layman's terms, but I think it's important for the council and the public to understand we don't have the MAC, but at the same time, we have a super challenging budget.
So I'll try to keep this as brief and
I know.
simple as I can. I think the first thing, just so the council's aware, the MAC is still in existence. That IRS refund is still not in. So a lot of the operational mechanics are still there. I think the biggest thing, the budgetary reductions. There were two components to the MAC. There was, as we've discussed, a significant amount of money that was held by the MAC at all times based off of the incorporating documents and the bond resolutions and the enacted state legislation. About 50%, roughly, very rough number, was actually just a simple balance sheet transaction, which in layman's terms is transferring it from your parents' savings account to your personal checking account. It had no budget impact whatsoever. The items that did have budgetary impact, we've been looking since 2016 as certain labor negotiations occurred or new debt occurred. How did that fold into the entire time? We've been looking at what happens to the budget in 2023. 2022 and 2023 were always the years. 22 where the massive decrease comes, 23 where it comes off entirely. What was not known a year ago right now was that the $1.5 million savings would get eaten up entirely by itself by health insurance increases and pension increases, which then left the planned expenditures, not even to talk about rising interest rates, because it had always, we were never going to be in a world where the city of Troy was still getting 0.2% effective interest rate on a short-term borrowing. That there was never a thought that that would be the world we lived in. What we thought the world would be a gradual increase similar to what we saw as you saw tonight. It gradually went down. It started before the pandemic, it was going down. The increase was thought it would just simply be a U shape. No one thought the spike was coming. But aside from that, the savings from the MAC debt budgetarily was encompassed entirely by health insurance and pension in 2023, which then left the remaining, what had been planned for, to be absorbed for within the budget, which I think that's why department heads in particular deserve so much credit for coming to the table to review their budgets in a fashion that we have not done before, where they had to make hard decisions, and I'm very appreciative of that. I don't know, this budget does not get under the tax cap without the help of department heads who came to the table.
I think that's helpful. Did anyone, while we're on the MAC, have questions or? Okay, I appreciate that. And yep, Councilmember
Sorry.
Soriento.
So
Yep.
you're saying that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 1.5 million of that MAC debt basically is being eaten up by the health insurance costs, right? But what about all of the prior years of that funding of what was budgeted to pay for those health insurance premiums?
So we were layering in, every year we were layering stuff into the max savings. That's how we did, in particular, debt and union negotiations, sorry.
Okay.
Their increases this year, I mean, I'm just picking on health insurance and pension. You can take anything that we talked about tonight in total and put it together and say that that covered the max savings. And none of that was foreseen. We didn't expect an 8% increase in health insurance. But I say that to say also, we're in a better position than other places are. Other places have double what we have. So in us not being community rated and having the plan we have is beneficial. As much as it's off, it's still beneficial that we're in that structure. I'm just picking on health insurance and pension. We can pick any of those. We can fold debt, I could fold debt into it in permanent salaries and say that covered. You know what I mean? It's just the compounding factors that made this so difficult.
Mhm.
So it's important to remember, to note that the MAC debt didn't just drop $6 million one day. That over the past couple of years, it stepped down. As it stepped down, it gave us the ability to reprogram those dollars into labor contracts, into renovating South Troy Pool, into building demos, into investments that had been neglected for many years while that $6 million was being diverted to debt service. So it has tapered down over the past couple of years. And we did a very careful analysis as we spent money and came to the council for bond authorization to make sure that we weren't getting over the tips of our skis, that in the out years, we would still be able to maintain operations. And what Andy indicated is exactly true. A year ago, we would not have anticipated that the cost of borrowing would rise 1,000% for us. We did not anticipate $650,000 in increases for the pension plan, $1 million for healthcare, $500,000 for energy. Those were astronomical increases that caught everybody off guard. We did expect that the Fed would start employing some quantitative easing and we would see rates go up again. But looking at trends, we knew, so we thought, that it would be a much more moderate increase, and that factored into our thinking about what debt we could take on, what contracts we could negotiate, what investments we could make. However, everything was thrown out the window when everything skyrocketed in the space of 30 days.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And, it's important, obviously, because it did consume so much of our budget. And, one of the big things overall on page 6, Andy, and I won't go line by line, but I did notice up in the general fund, so our serial bonds doubled to 18.4 mil.
Could I just, that doubled
Yeah.
because we did a massive serial bond issuance in January.
Okay.
So that it was appropriate in talking with fiscal advisors. That was the first time in 2 years that it was most advantageous for us to go to long term for a variety of different factors that went into it.
but our bands went down about 14 mil.
So we
Right.
converted, so the bump up in serial bonds, a little more than that because of the principal payments that were made, but we converted a lot. And then we were very aggressive in 2022 with pay downs.
Mhm.
We're always aggressive. When we talk tonight about being aggressive about pay downs, it's an enhanced aggressiveness. It's not newfound
Mhm.
when it comes to paying it down.
No, and you can see that because, overall, our grand total obviously went down, by 11 mil. One of the things also that stood out, Andy, the EFC, the bans on those, now we're bonding for the other munis. That's the whole, why are we getting hit so hard with this?
So water
Yeah.
we are the debt holder for the transmission main project. And other governments will, for the wholesale communities pursuant to their contracts, will pay their pro rata share to the water fund. And then the delta is the net, like, we'll talk about the DPU here.
Right,
The
yes.
revenue's in there for that other government contribution. So it does net out. But we are the debt holder for that project. There's provisions in local finance law that says you can't, what you can and can't bond for on the same project.
Gotcha.
And so the sewer, that is the CSO project. And
Okay.
in 2022, Albany started there, and Chris Whalen can speak much
Right.
better this than I can, but what is referred to as the Big C project in Albany, that project has started. And we've drawn down a significant amount of debt in the sewer fund for that project itself.
Good.
That debt, because the debt structure of the CSO project is different than the debt structure of the transmission main project, because the CSO project had a consortium of all the local governments put together, and they made their own LDC. That's why the debt instruments were working differently than the transmission main, is that the
Okay.
organizational structures themselves are different.
Okay. And, for new council members, like sitting down with Chris for the CSO project, if you haven't, it's really super worthwhile. So, if you haven't sat with them, I mean, it's like an hour, but it's so worth it. Council member Soriento, I think you sat with him on it. So, okay. So anything else on page 6? I think very cool. And then on page 7, the appropriations, I think the big thing on this, obviously the $2 million in ARPA.
Yes.
And, I guess my big question on that, Andy, when I was looking and, we'll get to it, but if, like, obviously I looked on the chart to see where the ARPA, and oddly, I saw it under public safety, which I know is under federally, but I saw that kind of odd that it was under public safety, number 1, just line. And then my bigger question, so 1, the 2 mil, that will directly go into the general fund. And then number 2, where is the other 22 mil reflected in here for the ARPA?
The other $22 million as appropriated, we're not doing it through original budget appropriation. We're doing it through budget amendments themselves. So it is not so the 22 that's already been appropriated is not reflective in the budget itself. That is a separate, we'll see it on the quarterly report in a few weeks, how that gets reported on.
Because I have been asking, I thought it was kind of odd that the council, that we haven't officially accepted the other 22 mil like we did the first 20 mil.
We did accept the other. I'll have to look
The
back at the
second?
second. I'll have to look back at the legislation for the first tranche.
Okay, so the second tranche, we'll say, will be reflected when we begin to appropriate those funds.
Yes,
Okay. So back to the 2 mil, you're lumping it under, in this line, and you're putting it into the general fund.
correct.
And it's distributed just like any general fund monies.
It's distributed in the general fund across allowable uses, not allowed to be used for debt nor pension.
Okay. Okay.
The first iteration would be to match it to one-time expenditures,
Mhm.
which I would define one-time expenditures to be that of any 200 account for starters. Any 200 account would be the first instance, and then the blanket across all allowable uses thereafter.
Okay. And then my second question, I noticed like the real property, we obviously have more, new apartment buildings, new properties on the tax rolls. How's that reflected in here? Only because, would that be under the revenue from real property? Only because, it,
So-
I guess it went up maybe about $1 million, or actually less, like 600K, $1 million maybe. So yeah.
So new assessments, new taxable assessments to a local government does not bring in new revenue. It redistributes the tax levy across all taxable assessments in a local government. And that gets to the point of, you could have a 2% tax cap. And if you look at your tax rate change could be 1%, and you could actually be over the property tax cap. Or you could have a tax rate change that's 10% and you're under the tax cap. So it's as assessed values change, it's a measure of how the tax levy is distributed across all taxable assessments in a local government. It does not bring in new tax revenue.
Couple people have asked me that, so I think it's important to address that. And I did notice our interfund transfers went down substantially from last year. It was at close to 4 mil last year.
So last year, when I get to the redundancies and simplicity of using the debt service fund.
Okay.
Last year, we were transferring money to the debt service, from the debt service fund to the operating funds to offset debt payments. That the decrease that you're seeing there is the elimination of that transfer being made. We're just getting all debt-related activities to the debt service fund themselves.
So that's that whole policy we passed
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason why that was so high for new council members in 2022, there was twofold. One, when I say that there was $1 million released by the MAC, that was a budgetary transfer. It was a portion of the money that was withheld in a separate fund based off of how it was the MAC was constructed. That was half of it. The other half was premiums, unused debt proceeds that we used to offset debt payments made in 2022.
Did council members have any questions? All right. Wanna roll? Yep, go ahead, Councilmember Min.
Andy, I know the STAR exemption does exempt seniors from a portion of property taxes, correct?
I believe so.
How is that reevaluated as we have an aging population that is either relocating or dying? Like, does it increase our tax revenue? It's a little morbid, but
It
How
would
it
say it would fall under the same principle of adding new assessed values. It wouldn't add new revenue. Any changes in exemptions would but it would alter the distribution of the tax levy across all taxable assessments in the city.
so it conceivably drop everyone's taxes a tiny bit.
All things being equal, it could. I think it's hard to pinpoint, like laser onto these specific things when you have two moving numbers. You have the levy and then you have the assessments moving either together or opposite directions.
And if we were to do a new city or countywide assessment, what would that do to our taxable revenue, our property tax revenue for the city as a whole?
Tax revenue would not change because it's based off, it's the total, the tax revenue for the city is the total levy needed for operations.
Thanks.
Awesome. Did anyone else have any questions on the overall? Okay, Andy, before we get into the departments, I recognizing we're going to go through, like, obviously the golf, during the golf, during recreations budget, et cetera. But there were a couple overall. So one of the things I noticed, Andy, sales tax pilot of the county. So on page 8, for council members, if you look under the non-property tax items, it bumps up like 1.3 mil. What's that based on?
So that is my least favorite. That is the hardest one to budget in any fund. That was taking a 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year analysis of total sales tax receipt collections in the county and running it through the formula of the city receives 19.65% of the first $80 million of sales tax receipts in the county. And then anything in excess of $80 million, we receive 9% of. So it was a mixture. It's an analysis using forecasting tools in Excel, average tools in Excel, and then blending 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year averages together. It's not, the city cannot just go look at 1 year for this because if the economy takes a sharp turn, we would have a significant budget shortfall in sales tax.
Right.
So that's why, and that's the same methodology that's been employed the last 6 years. Ever since I've been doing it, that's the methodology.
And for new council members, you'll hear that a lot. That it's based on the historical trends on a conservative approach. How about that?
Very good.
Okay. But that one actually was higher, so that's why I asked. Okay, and then I'll ask Rick, the franchise fee, when we talk to Rick. Oh, department income, real quick, under general government, same page, comptroller's fees. I noticed, like last year, we had a $30,000 estimate. The actual receipts were 57. You're thinking it goes back up to 50.
There was a trend for a lot of the smaller ones. It was based off of what we've been seeing, as you just said, for the last several years, to merit increases.
Okay. Get to advanced life support. We'll hit that with the fire, parking garage, marina.
So some of them, just as you're going, so parking garages.
Yeah.
So it's not all of them are based. So for example, parking garages, parking lots are based off permit numbers that we currently are seeing in each of the lots times 12 times the permit fee. It's just how that revenue comes. That's how we derive that revenue.
But the parking meters, I mean, that's a huge jump. Do we plan to change anything there? That's 190 to 300K.
So Dan Colleton can speak to the
Okay, good.
operational changes
Yep.
that he's seeing,
Okay.
but that's well merited based off of parking meters, parking in general, but parking meters especially. When you see the 190, there's an impact from the pandemic of meters not being on for parts of 2021. It also, when Dan and I looked at that revenue line, especially looking at where we are year to date, it merited the increase of $110,000.
We'll hit the ALS with the fire. I marked that one. Page 9. I apologize. Does anyone else have questions? We'll hit, like, I said, the marina, the golf during recreation and all that.
Just to note, there are going to be proposed proposed changes to the golf revenue structure at Fair Park. Looking at rate changes for not the carts, but both season passes and individual rounds. So I'll let the golf course manager speak more to the merits of that, but it is based off of what other local municipal golf courses charge as well.
And make sure he does be prepared to talk about the cards, because the revenue they're saying is going to jump a good 80K.
So that was based off of historical unit counts. So we could, we'll
Yeah.
have a handout ready to go to explain where those revenues are coming from.
Good.
Council President,
Councilmember Gully.
I also think that increases due to the fact that now we have proper drainage on the
Mhm.
course, and we'll get significantly more days of operation and be able to sell the carts where before.
Yeah.
We had to not let them on there, so it wouldn't destroy the work that they've done in the past. And I think it's gonna be exciting to watch this go over the next few years.
Good point. And, we'll have a lot to talk about when Greg and his team meet with us.
Council President?
Yes, Councilmember Min.
For the under culture and recreation, the special event reimbursement rate dropped by a significant amount.
We had budgeted Gilded Age in 2022. I'm not aware of them coming back. I just simply don't know if they're coming back in 2023 or not. If they do, that's a line that we would amend in the year. So say we get reimbursed $50,000, that is for cost. So we would amend the budget to put the funding back in the applicable department or department's budgets.
Okay. And for HBO, they're reimbursing our costs. Are they paying the city a flat fee or anything like that?
That
Just reimbursement.
just reimbursements, my understanding.
So this is, one, and it's certainly a tremendous amount of work, and I do want to acknowledge that. But I think we can point to this having a pretty strong impact on $100,000, $25,000. Hopefully they'll be back. I believe the odds are good, but more of this is more revenue coming in. More TV, more movies.
Andy, jumping to licenses and permits, I flagged that one. We bumped up quite a bit. Now we're looking at maybe 2 mil less.
On page 9,
Correct.
are you comparing the 681 to 1.3 million?
Yes.
So the 681 was driven by building permits in 2021. Building permits are budgeted based off of a projection done in conjunction by multiple departments. I know planning's involved, code enforcement is involved, in looking at future projects for next year and their viability. So that's what that revenue, and that's consistent with the methodology done in prior years,
Mhm.
is more of a project-based approach.
I just noticed in plumbing permits, I
Yeah.
found kind of odd. 40K last year, 0. the
That was a
prior year.
mistake in the
Oh, I
2022
was
budget.
wondering. I'm like, wow, plumbing permits, holy cow. Okay, and, the building permits, I guess, that surprises me a little, just, it at least appears more development, but you're estimating it's coming in a little lower than 2022.
That's that project-based analysis that was provided.
Okay. And then the street opening permits, who provides that, Andy? Is that our recreation?
That's a guess every year. That's a best estimate. I don't like using guess, based off of the anticipated work that's primarily National Grid. So that's an estimate as to what their projects are going to be in the following year.
And I won't get into traffic fines because I wrote a couple notes. And I know last year, I actually looked at my notes last year. I was able to find the notes, not the chart. But in my notes, when we spoke to the chief, we talked about designated car last year because it was estimated we would get more traffic time revenues. And so needless to say, I saw that was being estimated to actually go down this year. So we can talk to the chief, but if you could just give the chief a heads up, I don't want him blindsided. Okay,
I will.
thank you. Anyone else have any big questions on page 9? Okay, and then moving along, I will do my annual since 2016 TRF gifts and donations on the top of the page. So for new council members, that is the RPI St. Peter's back in, my gosh, the late 1990s. The foundation, the Troy Redevelopment Foundation, appropriates monies for grants. Long story short, it has not been increased in many years. However, after meeting with RPI's liaison, and I know that the mayor has had a couple interactions with the new president, I think we'll have a new, hopefully found partnership with RPI, and I'm hopeful that we become more of like a Cambridge or another municipality who has a world-renowned institution in their backyard and can actually take advantage of just this incredible institution that we haven't been able really to partner with, I don't believe, as well as we should be partnering. So,
Council President,
yes, Councilmember
Um,
Conley Wilson.
so with the CRC, is that another thing where we amend that okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, this
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
minute.
This is where we get all our NIP grants.
Yep.
Okay, great. I was a little confused about that. Thank you.
And, Andy, you could tell new council members, but you'll notice, under some of the grants that there's a real baseline, allow them or zero only because we get the grants throughout the year and then we amend the budget.
And we're gonna be moving all grants out of out of any of the operating funds, and they're gonna be recorded in the miscellaneous special revenue fund, which is consistent with what other places do.
Will you lump it or you'll still line it?
It'll still be like,
Okay,
the reason, they won't be in the general fund anymore. They'll be in a separate fund, which is consistent with what other places do.
Mhm.
And I think it's a better reflection of operational revenue within a fund, as grants are more one-time basis.
Okay. Health contribution, I noticed that was up 140K, which we talked about. And then I was just curious, why is ARPA under public safety? I get it should be under federal aid, but why is it under the public safety?
It
kind of
probably should have
category?
been moved up, and I apologize for that.
Okay, so you'll bump that up, right?
Yeah, when we do the final print, we'll move
Okay.
it up to general government support.
Awesome. All right, any other questions?
Actually, what we'll
Yes.
probably do is just remove the subheadings and just run it all under federal aid.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, now, if council members are good, we'll get into the departments. And we'll hit the mayor's department first. How about that?
You want to do Sharon, because she's here?
Oh, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
I was wondering if Sharon was here. Great. Andy, just out of respect for the department heads, are any other, none? Okay,
No, well,
okay.
all the ones who are going to be here the rest of the week.
Sorry, there was a net.
Did you get it?
Not a net, a net.
Annette.
You get it?
Annette.
Ah, boom.
Annette.
Andy got me.
Annette Funicello.
Or yeah, I just called you Andy. But I'm oh, okay. So we are going to page,
Go fish.
yep. Thank you. Boom. Hi, Sharon. How are you? If you don't mind using the mic, it's more for the recording and public. We have thousands of folks right now watching on YouTube. Okay, like 10 or tens.
10,000.
Hey, if we hit 11, we've got.
Get a Snicker.
Thank you for joining us, Sharon. And so we are hitting the Bureau of Assessments, page 39 for folks out there. And Sharon, maybe you want to give an overview and things in store for 2023.
How's that?
Perfect. Wow. Real good.
So my department manages approximately 13,500 parcels within the city of Troy. We update photos, keep the inventory updated, process all exemptions and assessments. The exemptions that we process every year, low-income senior, nonprofit, disability. We also remove exemptions on a daily basis for various reasons. We process and update all the return mail from the treasurer's office. And we manage all of surplus property for the city. So once we foreclose and the deed is filed, the inventory and all of the properties are listed. We advertise them, we sell them, which you saw that a few weeks back. It's a whole lot of fun. I just wanted to touch on, I saw that we saved $125,000. I did put in for a reval again this year. That was your $125,000 savings. It was removed from the budget. But I would not be doing my job if I didn't mention to you that our equalization rate is dropping rapidly. We're at 76% currently, and I anticipate another large drop for 2023. The equalization rate is derived by New York State and is a direct correlation between the assessed value of a property and the current sale price. The Rensselaer County Assessors Association, of which I head currently, we're working together to urge our county executive to help fund a reassessment project for any interested municipalities within the county. There's a lot of places that have equalization rates a lot lower than we do, but we are, like I said, dropping rapidly. Just as an example, we had an apartment complex sell recently in the city of Troy. The complex sold for $27 million. Full market value of that complex on my roll is $9 million. So it's time. And there's a lot of examples like that. And as Andy said before, it doesn't increase our revenue, it spreads it more fairly. So.
Councilmember Gully.
So that confuses me, Sharon. When a property sells for that much money, isn't there any recording of that and any adjustment off of that? Do we just leave the same assessment just because it's been on the books, but we don't look at when it comes up for sale, there's no adjustment done at that point?
I can only change it if there's been a building permit or there's something different about the property. If the property is exactly how it was in 2013, legally, I can't touch it.
That seems kind of foolish.
That's the law. And on that same note, in 2013, when we did the reassessment, you know, that was when RPI was having everybody move back onto campus. They wanted everybody on campus. And so the two families throughout the city were assessed very low. And we have the opposite going on right now, where the apartment complex, you know, the apartments are going crazy. And, you know, the multifamilies are not assessed where they should be.
Sharon, what was the reaction so far in terms of the county?
The county director for our real property was going to invite Steve to our next meeting, which is a week from tomorrow, hoping that we can get Steve to our meeting to discuss it with him. We know he's on board to do it. We just have to figure out how to pay for it and how to spread it. Because I know that Sand Lake is currently, they're gonna do one for next year. But many of the other municipalities, Rensselaer, hopefully will get some help from the county so that we can do it, you know, everybody up there at the same time. And in conjunction with that, the state recently raised the rate for the low-income senior exemption. We're currently at 37.4. The state raised it up to 58,000. But in order to even talk about that, it would be best if we did the reval and talk about that at the same time. So we don't have to go, and it's also countywide too. It's good if we're all on the same rate schedule. Meaning that you don't want, you know, the city of Troy to be 37 and Sand Lake to be 45, Schodack to be, you know, 50. You want to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing. So to do that, to make that next step, would be best to get everybody reassessed and then talk about raising that exemption, which hasn't been raised since 2007 or 8.
And the max is 58K.
The max could be whatever we decide, but you can't go higher than 58K. Correct. Yep. Which, you know, downstate, that's nothing.
No, but up here, yeah, it's
Right.
a lot of money.
Exactly. So that's,
Yeah,
It's
keep
my
us
spiel.
in the loop, obviously, on
Mhm.
what transpires on the county.
absolutely.
Sharon, I did know that temporary salaries were out and your assessment clerk was not filled. And maybe Andy, this one I noticed was an example that actually did get the bump from last year, even though it wasn't filled. So maybe a handful there. So Sharon,
So-
you could talk about the temp and why it
So-
wasn't filled. And then
So I don't have last year's budget in front of me.
I
What,
got
that assessment clerk that was vacant last year, what was that salary? Assuming it's like 30.
37,331.
So the jump from 37,331 to 43,94 is pursuant to the CSEA contract. And that's the raise, and I don't know off the top of my head, the percentage, but that's what that's reflective of.
And that was my question, because are we bound, and maybe it's a question for Rick, to bump that because
There's nobody in
we
the
didn't
position.
have to do that when we were at Thruway Canal. We saved tons of money on vacant positions because we didn't have to bump it. Even the CSEA, et cetera, bound by union contracts because nobody was in the position. And then they worked, were on probation, et cetera, and then got the bump, you know, with a bump if another bump was in place. I guess, why are we bumping salaries? That was my question. Yeah. Empty date.
I see what you're saying though.
Yeah.
I think
So
it's
if you could look
ridiculous.
into that. I noticed that, and I know we didn't do it in my prior role.
President.
Yes, Councilmember Conley Wilson.
I just kind of want to say, like, you know, that may be a reason why that position was not filled. That may be why someone didn't go through the process of applying, is because, oh, well, I might not be able to survive on $37,000, but I could survive maybe on $40,000. Yeah, that might be something we want to consider, you know. How are our workers being compensated for the important work that they're doing? And how can they, you know, ensure that I understand your point, but I also want to think about, you know, how are we treating our city employees and how are we saying thank you for the service that they're doing?
Right, but this is vacant.
Yeah,
you know.
I
think
understand.
you're more.
Council President,
Yes,
I just wanted to
Councilmember.
make a note, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is already an incumbent that's currently working, let's say as an account clerk, and the assessment clerk is a few grades higher. So let's say the account clerk was there for a year, and they move up to an assessment clerk. Just per
Maybe.
se, then wouldn't we want to just make sure that that money is already budgeted in to make sure that contractually they, because of their years of service, to make sure that money is funded based on their step? I'm just,
Yeah,
just,
so that's a good point. I mean,
yeah.
one of the tricky things about, that's with no disrespect, when you get to like, I mean, it's more prevalent in, say, streets, for example, where there's clear lines up.
Right.
And we have to factor in exactly that point. If there's an MEO light vacancy and there's laborers who are a grade or a step 10
Yes.
or whatever the step 5, they could go into a vacant MEO light position and they would be a step 5 immediately. So that's a consideration in this as well. To the Councilmember Soriento's point, if you have a grade and what's it, clerk?
5.
An 8?
Assessment clerk is an 8, account clerk's a 5.
Yeah, so if you had an account clerk who moved to an assessment clerk and they're a step 5, they would be bumping up from a 5 to an 8. But if this is in here as a step 1 or a step 0, we would need to do a budget amendment immediately to get that person into it as well.
Also, is the contract still, the language still in place as anyone from the outside that they can come in as a step 2?
It's just, we redid we redid the steps to years now because it's a lot easier.
Okay.
So they could come in and now that's a step 2 is now step 1. So they could come in at the second level step
Okay.
and not the
So-
initial step. That's still there, yes.
So that's kind of hard trying to
Yeah.
figure out a budget on this because anyone at the max also, like the funds wouldn't even be in there for that. Or someone from the outside coming in and there would be plenty of funding. So how did,
We usually try to give the flexibility of step 1 year of service. Also considering the fact that the budget comes out October 7th. Sharon could hire the vacant assessment clerk tomorrow. And then that assessment clerk is going to be at the 1 year step in October of 23. So what we do across the board for all step increases that you'll see in here is we do salary savings to prorate the difference in the salaries. So what you'll see is a step, the higher step salary for the title. And then there'll be a salary savings line. That's the total of the it'll be a negative number. That negative number is the difference in the first step and the second step.
so then we would need a budget transfer basically. No.
So it's to block against having to bring a budget amendment forward, but not overinflating permanent salary lines.
All right, that's a learning.
It's
thing for
good.
me,
I
so-
mean, that's what we're here to do.
Chair.
Yep, Council.
I guess I'm just a little confused because when I worked for the state and I started as a grade 5 and I stepped up, every time I went to those steps, I got that salary increase. But the person who took my job did not get my rate of pay. They got the starting rate of pay.
That's right.
And then they worked up from there. I can't see why we bump up empty positions. Seems like we're just keeping that bundle of money in there and we're increasing it. In reality, in an empty position, I just don't understand. I mean, it just doesn't seem.
As far as
Isn't
I
smart to
know,
do that.
the city of Troy has always budgeted pursuant to the Schedule A of all union contracts and has not done this method. That's an opinion to be given by corporation counsel if that's something that is viable. I can imagine.
Yeah. And
I'll leave it.
yeah,
there.
and for me, why it really hasn't been raised in prior years, we haven't had so many vacant positions. And clearly between the ones that were vacant last year, the new positions that were added last year into this year, not filled still. So it just popped out at me. So, you know, I do apologize for raising the whole issue, but at the same time, it's good to talk about it. We do need the latest vacancy list also. So we need that list. So if you could get from Gabrielle, that would be awesome. And, you know, just to move it forward. So Sharon, maybe you could talk about, you know, the temporary salaries, they're out. I noticed, from last year. And then, last year you had temporary salaries of 12 this year, 0. Did you use the temporary salaries? Because I do know sometimes when we put in a full shot in the last 6 months, it's kind of a red flag that it wasn't used. So A, was it used? Why are they out? If it wasn't used, whatever. And then secondly, why was the assessment clerk not filled last year and this year?
So I had an assessment clerk that I hired in April
Oh,
of this year. Yeah, I don't know why there's no money shown here, but,
So the current salary you're gonna see in the budget document is reflective of the salary of the position on October 7th. So reflect, so if it's $0 current salary, the position is currently vacant.
Okay.
so I had an assessment clerk from April until the end of August.
Okay, so there was an issues.
And I'm following all civil service guidelines to fill that position as quickly as possible. But to Kiani's point, there were 4 people that took and passed the test who aren't interested because on the sheet that goes out, there's a salary range. And the salary was, I don't know, 37 to 46 or something. So of course, what number do they see? 46. So when I called to offer them the job, no. Do you offer overtime? No, we don't have any overtime. No. So right now I'm working with the list, a very short list, to try to fill the position that I had.
It's a
So-
good entry level, though. I mean, 40 plus benefits is not a bad gig, you know.
Absolutely, but not if you're working at Albany Med making 46, you know what I mean? So that's where we're at. Yes, I need that position. I miss her awful.
Council President, yes, Councilmember Soriento.
So if the list has been exhausted, meaning that there's less than 3 candidates willing to accept appointment on the list, you can hire provisionally.
Provisional.
Now, maybe if like, rather than that big, huge gap from the minimum and maximum, and I know exactly what you're talking about with the salary range.
Yep.
Maybe it should, the gap should be a little bit smaller and base it off of the step 1 and I'm still going by old, step 1 and step 2 range. Being that step 2 range is actually the highest that you can go entering in, the highest salary that you can start off with coming in.
Gabrielle gave me a list and
Yeah.
she said, whatever, 1, this is the number right here. So I didn't know there was any option other than that, but that's what I was trying to use.
Yeah, I mean, but the overall eligible list, though, if there are less than 3, I mean, so.
Correct.
Okay, so the whole overall, not the certification of eligibles, right? Certification of eligibles is there's like a shortened list that these are the people that you can hire off of versus the whole entire list that you can see exactly who passed and what they scored and what their rank was.
So they sent out another letter
Okay.
and yesterday was the deadline for the letters to be received. And there was 1 letter. So
this is exhausted.
the list is exhausted. Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
I did turn temperature up. I saw people like shivering.
Erkiani's teeth over there were chattering.
Sharon,
So-
go ahead.
Chair.
Councilmember Gully.
Again, I get a little confusing. When we put out those notices, why, if we have a position that has a salary line of 37 or 40,000, why do we put it out with a range of 37 to 46? Why do you put that out like that? I mean, if you don't have that, if that's not what the salary pays in that position, do you have that flexibility? If they come in, can you go to the mayor and say, hey, I've got a good one here. They're looking for 43 instead of 40. Can we negotiate that and put that in? I mean, what is the purpose of having that range on that application or that form if you don't have the ability to negotiate that within council or the budget?
I've hired so few people here. I've only lost people since I've been here. Irene can answer that better because that's what she does every day, and she helps me as well.
Good.
So the minimum and the maximum range and the, is based off of the Schedule A, I believe it is, from the CSEA union contract or whichever contract it's based off of. So I understand why, and I've been doing it also, when I did civil service for Troy. We entered in the minimum and the maximum, the absolute highest, because if there is an employee, a current employee that has reached those years of service, and let's say they took the exam, passed, and were reachable for appointment, that's the range. So then that maximum, there could be a possibility that they've maxed out their years of service where they would fall into
They
that,
fall into that max.
into that max. However, though, the actual job, and I'm not talking about an exam announcement, an actual job announcement listing an available position. If you are like going to bring it outside to, to the open public, then my recommendation would just be a step 1 and 2 range, kind of, just so it doesn't really, give like false hope to anyone that does actually apply from the outside versus an employee currently working for the city.
Or an explanation on the sheet of how someone will get that higher number.
It's in the contract.
I know, but the person that might sit in front of you might not have a contract, might not be a CSDA employee, might be just a person coming in cold. So there should be some sort of explanation so they know that on that announcement before they take the test, before they assume that, hey, if I do well, I can get the top number. If they can't get it because they're outside, there should be some sort of notification so we cut out all the chaff and try to minimize all the aggravation of find the right person.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems like it's like putting 2 worms on a hook and hoping somebody will bite.
Yeah, I think that just gives the administration a little bit of wiggle room to basically evaluate someone and compensate them based on their education and experience level. I mean, the whole portion of civil service is to absolutely meet the minimum quals to be able to even be considered for appointment. But then there could be an incumbent that has higher qualifications where that probably opens up, and I can be wrong. I haven't, but
You're getting really
Yeah,
deep.
so we're going
Yeah.
deep. Let's move on. I'll have more questions.
civil
for you another
service
time.
details.
I get it. I get it. I just think it's ridiculous.
Okay. Sharon, is GAR still under contract? I know they were hired for the commercial assessments. How did that go? And
No, I haven't used them. I use a local commercial appraiser when I need assistance for, big projects or planning. This is, if they're doing a new pilot or something and I need a commercial appraisal, I use a local guy.
but they were hired, I recall, and I didn't vote for it because my feelings on GAR.
Yep.
But yeah, they were hired, I want to say 2 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, they were doing my commercial sketches, additions, all that kind of stuff. But I haven't utilized them since then.
Okay, I could have sworn they were for appraisals also, but. Councilmember Gully, did you have a question?
I forgot. Oh,
Oh.
can you mention the name of the person you use locally? The appraiser you use locally?
That would be public.
Okay, Steve Clark.
Steve Clark.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Sharon, happening in your world that you want to apprise us of? Okay. Any questions for
Thank you.
Sharon? Great. Sharon, thanks. Keep us in the loop on what transpires with the county. 'Cause
Yeah, maybe you could put a little,
Don't ask me, someone else. Maybe
anybody?
Councilmember Soriento. Not me.
I'll take whatever I can get. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. All right, so now we will move to the mayor, if okay, and then you, Andy, since you have so many. Yes, we always do ours last. Because then everyone's so tired, we all get huge bumps.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but it's about time we did.
Hi, Mayor.
Good evening. I think if you move to page 21, that's where the mayor's office budget
God bless you.
starts. Page 1 is a summary of the various codes, so we can probably skip right over that and go into the schedule of expenditures. There's not significant change in the mayor's budget. We, with one exception, we have had no luck in hiring a public information officer. So we did put a few extra dollars into the budget to make that position more attractive. Other than that, the increases that you see in the salaries are pursuant to the non-rep policy. The mayor does not get an increase pursuant to that, and there is no increase requested for the mayor. However, feel free to be generous if you want. The other increases are in Code 8 are, as Andy has reviewed, pension, health insurance, dental insurance. We skinnied down some of our Code 4, but frankly, we only have $2,250 in Code 4. So it's not an area ripe for savings. So it's a pretty boring budget, but I will entertain questions if you have any.
Yeah, Mayor, a couple things. How is the filling of the director
Oh.
of the
Yes.
equality and inclusion?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did
That's okay.
intend to touch on that. I did have difficulty finding a qualified candidate for that position. And again, I'm looking for somebody who has qualifications in it, and it is a tight budget for that. But I do have somebody who is very interesting to me at this point in time. I have not moved as of this moment because I wanted to see where we ended up in the budget.
And, you know, obviously it jumped out at me. The deputy mayor is in for close to $4,000 raise. And if you recall, a year and a half ago, we bumped the prior deputy mayor quite substantially because the person in the position, you know, was obviously working above and beyond, then received a bump. And then the new deputy mayor came on board and got that bump, but now we want to bump the new deputy mayor who's been in for a few months, another 4. So what's up with that?
I'm just following the non-rep agreement that was passed some years ago. So it's just a mathematical adjustment.
What non-rep agreement was that?
Do you recall the year that was? passed?
I believe it was
18 or 7?
January
18.
20.
We could get you a copy of that.
January
Could you
2020.
Council President.
Yes, council member.
Did that non-rep
Soriento.
agreement reflect a 4% raise for this year or for next year? It
Yes.
specified that?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, can I get a copy also, please?
Yeah, I think sending that to everyone would be helpful. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay, and now last year, Andy, what surprised me, you didn't have a -1 with the grant writing. I know obviously that hasn't been filled for many years. Are you like stating next year it will be completely out? Is
Yeah,
that
so if it's
-1?
not, my understanding under civil service law is if it's not funded, it's not, it's abolished. So carrying the 0 positions we took out deputy comptroller as well. There's some in DPU that we took out that were unfunded, and were in there, so they were in there as one, but zeros. So we just deleted all the zero positions have all been removed.
But the ones that are vacant, you kept in, obviously.
Yes.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember Mims.
For the Director of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion, why was that position not put under Economic Development?
I don't see it as an economic development position.
Why not?
Well, I guess why?
I mean, that seems like when you're talking about, helping communities of color, it's accessing different opportunities for business development, planning, and it sort of seems like that would be a very effective place. Albany County has a Black Chamber of Commerce, for example, and that's something that's missing here in Troy. And seeing someone in that leadership position to really help support economically, especially as we're going into very difficult times. And, I just kind of wonder if that would make that position have a broader reach.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's a narrower view than I was hoping to pursue with this position. Not to say that it couldn't go into economic development, but I'm looking more broadly than that. I would like this position to do a number of things internally and externally. Internally would be, I guess, evaluating the culture here, making sure that the culture is conducive to bringing in people who are underrepresented, supporting them in the process of moving upwards, making sure that the programs and offerings that we have are accessible and available to the communities that typically don't participate in them. So, for example, if it's the housing program that we contract with TRIP or Habitat for Humanity, it's making sure that the design of the program, the outreach, the marketing reaches all segments of the community equally. It's building relationships that could provide individuals, specifically building relationships with schools, EOC and other training programs to bring people into opportunities for employment in city government, as well as looking and making connections in the private sector. So I think it's broader than economic development. I also think it's probably, despite the fact that I was not able to fill the position, I think it's one of the more important positions in the city. It's an important direction move that we need to make. And I don't want it to get lost in a department. I want to supervise it directly. I want to be a voice in the design of that position and the design of the activities that go on in that position.
Do you think that having such a broad focus, because, I mean, frankly, what you're asking for is essentially a second deputy mayor. With the kinds of things that you're describing, do you think that this is even close to what a commiserate salary would be? I mean, this is someone who's in HR, working internally, economic development, housing, community outreach, PR.
Well,
public
sure. I think,
communications.
what we pay, we're going to get what we pay for. We're not going to get more than we do pay for. So at this level, it's not going to be a seasoned professional of 25 years of experience, which would be outstanding. It's going to be somebody who probably got 5 to 10 years of experience, who has connections, who has relevant experience in these areas. Are they going to do everything that I'm going to want? No, nobody's been able to do that yet. But it is what we can afford at this time. And I think it will be an important first step.
Do you think that one of the challenges of hiring is that because, this is so closely tied to you personally and the mayor's office personally that, you know, in another, your term limited, like, will this position exist under a future administration? Do you see it becoming part of civil service or as part of the union?
I don't see it as becoming part of civil service. I've not seen that model in other communities that have successfully done this. What happens after I'm gone, unfortunately, I have no control over. But I think if we bring in an individual who is dynamic and successful, and we create a cultural expectation that it will not guarantee that person's continuance, but it will make it more difficult to curtail that initiative.
All right, thank you.
Did I'm sorry, did I think, if I haven't, I will share with you the job description and the quals that I put together for the
That would-
position, so that you can get a better look at it. I did not review it before this meeting. It's been a while since I read it, so I may not have done the best job explaining the vision. for it.
I've looked for those before and I haven't been able to find them on the city's
Okay.
website. So I'm sure everyone would really like to see, because obviously it's very high expectations and a complicated job and a somewhat, you know, very difficult job.
And, you know, on
But a
that,
great boss.
on that note, for some of the new council members, we debated this position quite a bit last year when it was proposed for the 2022 budget, because, you know, those questions did come about, council member men. So they're good questions and, you know, it's debatable. You have pros and cons, and the exempt position who, you know, solely is mayoral appointed or civil service. And so that was discussed quite a bit. Councilmember Gully also thought maybe personnel, but at the end of the day, the mayor did do job description. I think that that would help. I'm just shocked that you weren't able to fill it, but you know, obviously that didn't happen. And I think Councilmember Soriento had a question on this note, and then we'll move on.
I did. Is this
Mhm.
position considered management confidential? MC, we'll say.
Aren't all
I don't recall. I'd have to
really
check.
know.
Gabrielle,
Okay.
I don't do anything with civil
I'm
service
only-
because I
I'm-
always mess
The
up.
only
So
reason why I'm saying that, and Gabrielle's probably listening to me saying, no, you're wrong. No, but, so my understanding with the whole civil service process. So every position is considered civil service, but it's how it's classified. So,
okay.
and the reason why I'm saying that is because when a position's being established, it's automatically competitive. And there's a whole process that you have to go through to take it outside of the competitive class. And
Mhm.
that's obviously if the state, which they would have the final say, actually, the Secretary of State would have the final say. And it could take a couple years. Now, I know that there was a public hearing in regards to amending the jurisdictional classification on that position. And I believe, I can't recall though if it was for non-competitive or exempt.
I will have to refer to the file.
Okay,
I do,
All right.
Gabrielle did a lot of work on this for me and set it up the way she felt was appropriate.
okay.
And I trust her judgment
Mm-hmm.
on this. So, but I'd be reticent to try to pull that out of my memory right now. I'll go back to the file. I'll pull all that out.
And the only reason why I am asking that question and whether it's in regards to being management confidential is because, so if a position is in the non-competitive class, obviously we all serve almost all of us serve a probationary period. But non-competitive class, even though the language is written differently in the rules and possibly in the union contracts, if they're designated as being in the union, it's a 5-year probationary period. However, if a position's in the non-competitive class and considered management confidential, they do not have a probationary period, which means they are an at-will employee. So that's why I asked that, because of the security of that position. Whether, if they're considered management confidential, then technically they're going to be an at-will employee, whether they're non-competitive and definitely exempt. Or if they are not really management confidential or considered non-management confidential, then if they serve that 5-year probationary period, then they would have Section 75 rights. Right? Well, yeah.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
You're getting way
Yeah.
deep,
So,
council member.
you know,
But it's
Much of
helpful.
what you've said rings a dim bell in my head. So please let me check the file and
Okay.
see how this was set up, and I can send you a note on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I did find my notes from last year. The deputy mayor did get an 8K, then 2022, then the 2, because we bumped, if you recall, the 8K. Then 2 for 2022, and now 4 is proposed for 2023. Okay. All right, Mayor, anything else, or?
No, I'll get that information on the director's position to you out, if not tonight, then tomorrow morning.
Perfect. That's fine. Tomorrow's fine. Thank you, Mayor. We'll move now to Andy. Andy has quite a few departments. Let's hit it.
Page 26. Figured go just in page order and we'll hit personnel last, like the personnel pages of each department.
Sounds good. Councilmember Figueroa, all good?
Yep, all good.
Awesome. Thank you.
So starting on page 26, permanent salaries, all the change is from the increase is from the non-rep policies and CSEA contracts. There's a new line, temporary salaries, $15,000. We anticipate a retirement of an employee in the comptroller's office in early 2023. That person does a lot. Everyone does a lot. That person's responsibilities tend to be very niche and dependent on the time of the year. The hope is that this person will come back part-time. They are willing to come back part-time in retirement to assist in the training of new staff. We can't replicate. That person helps me with processing of garbage bills, but I can't replicate. We do garbage bills once a year. We can't replicate it as the year goes on. It's just we're gonna have to reverse it and things like that.
So you're planning.
We're planning, and we have found ways to train employees. Over time, I increased $2,500 based off changing the CSEA contract. We decreased, then decreased all accounts in code 3, kept the same or decreased lines in code 4, decreased consultant services $20,000, brought it down to $100,000. That account is used for the city's actuarial services. It is the payment to fiscal advisors. Fiscal advisors is paid a percentage of the city's issuance, and I will give them credit. They don't encourage us to issue more debt, so they get more money. And there's some small payments in there for the web payment website. And then also in there, what I did include was one potential bond rating in the event we go to long-term debt. For new council members, we have to pay an exorbitant amount of money for mandatory credit ratings when you go to long-term debt. And I anticipate only using one credit rating agency. We use 2. Moody's rates us and S&P rates us. If we do go to long-term debt, we will get rated by Moody's. And we'll wait and see if S&P, if they call you, they will rate you for free. If you call them, you have to pay them. So we'll wait for S&P to call us.
And Andy, you addressed the lines that I circled. My only other question, I did see you lined out, as we talked about earlier, the deputy Are you having a tough time finding the principal account clerk?
So the principal account clerk position, the person who is in that role is now the city's purchasing agent pending the exam. Once that person passes the test and is reachable, we will look to fill the principal account clerk position.
Okay.
It also allows us time to look at revamping purchasing itself, which we talked about last year, and then some
Yeah.
things came up this year that have delayed that.
I wrote that
yeah.
down.
So there's been a little bit of a delay in that for me, and what I did. So we're gonna look at that in the next few, once the budget kind of subsides, the hearings kind of get going to other departments, but we're gonna look at purchasing policies and procedures in the city, which will then delve into internal practices and procedures out of purchasing and look at revamping it itself.
I like that.
So-
I think it's long overdue.
So we're, the principal account clerk position that is in the budget is deferred hiring date to July 1st, which is the salary savings of 24,367.
Any questions? All right. Keep running, mister.
They'll just go in order because I know it's the auditor's position that's pursuant,
Well,
that
that's
title's an UPSU, that's pursuant to that. Bureau of Cash Receipts, permanent salary changes are reflective of the CSEA contract, and then decreased the lines as we were able to based off of historical spending.
I did notice the health insurance went up in this department quite
So
substantially.
that's an example of a plan change.
Okay. Councilmember Gully wrote something really nasty on a sticky Mrs. Freeze. I just turned the page. He wrote Mrs. Freeze.
Council President.
Hey,
I'm moving to the other side of the table.
oh, Seamus,
Oh,
you're
the-
wonderful. Thank you. No change in the cash receipts.
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember Sorrento.
Andy, the second account clerk listed down here under, on page 34. The current salary is 34,933. Proposing 38,146. Is that due to a step increase on top of the 4%?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's no salary changes in the entire budget that are outside of policy or contracts.
Okay.
All right.
I wasn't sure if there was
Yeah.
like out of grade pay
No.
incorporated into that or anything.
No.
Okay.
Seamus, you're wonderful. You're just looking to get exercise.
Yeah, please, thank you.
I'm good.
I'm good, thank you, though.
Councilmember Gully has like a canteen.
Page 36.
Yes,
Learned
sir.
it from my hero.
36. Ooh,
Permanent salaries, that's reflective of the salaries of the individuals in the department. This is one of those situations that we discussed about earlier, that a higher step employee went into the purchasing agent position than what was there previously. Office supply, so the office supply account that you see negatives across, and then that decreased it to $500. We pool, we aggregate all the department's purchases into office supplies and then distribute it out by journal entry. So the $500 is almost an inventory of office supplies on an annual basis. That can be negative or positive to end the year, depending on if we stock up for supplies or not as the year goes on. Kept all the other accounts the same or decreased as needed. I did, and across all the departments, keep dues and subscriptions in the budget based off of current costs for different associations that we're a part of. We have joined 3 or 4 different groups, both in between comptrollers and purchasing, that have produced very good, and kind of dovetails to training. They've all had very good annual conferences that multiple people have been able to go to this year. We sent myself or other staff went to New York State GFOA, NICOM's annual conference, and we just last week went to it's called SAMPO. It's the New York State chapter for the purchasing group. So we're trying to get out to see more training as things are evolving.
It's important. And Andy, as you mentioned, the senior account clerk was added, correct? And you were able to fill that sufficiently.
Yes, we were.
Yeah. Andy, one of the other, I thought this was odd, maybe it's me, the health insurance was 0 in the current budget, but yet it was 10 grand the year before, now 11.5. But why was it 0 in the current?
Because the purchasing agent was vacant
Oh, okay.
purchasing agent was vacant until June or July of this year. Was it August? August of this year. It is the to my understanding, the last standing test that was called pre-pandemic that has still not been given. With still no testing.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Moving along, we did assessments.
I think that's it for mine.
Personnel.
Oh, yes.
Come on, brother. Andy, I'm on to you, page 51.
Again, permanent salaries, that's reflective of current contracts. Just to note, the negative 17,850 in the current budget for office equipment is an accounting issue that we're currently working through. Will be corrected. The current budget that you are seeing in this document is the adjusted budget through budget transfers and amendments approved on October 6th. So it is the most current budget for the 2022 fiscal year. Not much change, no cost increases in any of the accounts.
Andy, the one question I had, so last year, I know the prior deputy mayor back in, it was before COVID, talked about the whole employee recognition program. It fell by the wayside, then COVID hit, boom, boom, boom. Fast forward to today, there was in the 2022 budget, 7K. Is that the 7K for the consultant services here?
So that account has been misnamed
Okay.
for years. It was
So there
not,
is no
there was
employee-
not that, it was labeled employee recognition program, but that's not the purpose of the account. It is used for third-party services.
Now,
I believe that is, I can check on what that line actually is for. Because 63 is the employee assistance program. 86 is the drug and alcohol testing, and I can check what 90 is for as well.
yeah, that'd be helpful. Councilmember Gully.
Really, budget time isn't probably the time to bring this up, but maybe it is. When we talk about employee recognition, since it was brought up, I'd like to just talk about that a little bit. Over the years I've been on the council, and even before that, I knew many city workers. Back 20 years ago, when a person put their 25, 30 years in service for the city recognized that. What I'm hearing now over this last term with our current administration is that none of the employees who are putting in their time and diligently retiring from service here are getting any type of recognition. And I thought that maybe that's what that fund should be used for. And I just want to point out that I feel the biggest asset of the city are the employees. And I think that most would agree with me. And I'd like you to consider some way to focus on maybe recreating that type of program. Even if, how much could it really cost? Even once a year, you just call the retirees and took them out to a dinner or just a little recognition, say, hey, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your loyalty. And we appreciate all you've done for us. And they get nothing. And I could name numerous names of people who've contacted me out of frustration. And I've mentioned this to a few people before. I don't know, it just never went anywhere. So I'm mentioning again in this budget that I'd like to see something done to recognize the employees who have given their years of service to us at the end, because I think they do deserve it, and it'd only be a small piece that we do, even if we did it once a year, a dinner once a year to recognize everybody, it'd be pennies. So I just want to say that while we're here and while that was brought up, because I have short-term memory and I probably wouldn't remember it tomorrow.
And, and on that note, I know a number of state agencies when they hit 25, 30, 35, just once a year, recognize those, historic, years of service, like at Canal, we have people there 35, 38 years, and they would have a luncheon and they would get a little pin for their service. And it didn't cost a lot, but it meant the world to the employees. So I think it's really important to do that. And I know that the prior deputy mayor, it was the intent to try to start something like that, but then
Because we talked about that.
unfortunately, yeah. Yep.
Council President.
Yes.
Now I'm going to
council
show you
members and-
now I'm about to explain my age. I've actually experienced that and I have the pen to show it.
You have 30 years?
No, it was 5. It was every 5 years. You would be recognized for your years of service and they would actually have a luncheon right in City Hall.
Yeah.
And this, we're talking about the
Very.
Monument Square.
Yeah.
So, but it was
Yeah.
nice.
Yep. Real nice. I do want
Well,
you
we
to know,
can
I,
put together a number.
yeah.
Insert it in somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go to lunch.
It'll boost
At
employee
lunch,
morale. too.
Very
I
a
think.
modest,
Well,
modest lunch and a pin, I think would be really nice. So anyway,
Any recognition would be nice right now. Because I think
Yeah.
for moral standards, I think it's important for our employees to know that, they ought to feel good about their job, not, and Mr. Mayor, I talk to a lot of them. Believe me, I have a lot of friends that work for the city and I get into in-depth conversations with them and I'm just frustrated to hear how they feel because I think that takes away from their ability to really step up and do that little extra when they need to, because it's like saying, screw that, nobody really cares about us. And I heard that many times and I'm just sad to see that happen. And I think that we can do better. And I hope that we can look at this. And I would not be objective to putting that money into a program to do that each year for the employees of the city.
you're out of order, sir. Thank you.
Can I,
Yes.
your 143409 is the annual cost for the civil service software that they use. 14340963 is the employee assistance program. 40986 is mandatory drug and alcohol testing, third party. 40990 is civil service proctors.
Okay. Moving to the positions, Andy, I know last year, 2 positions were added. That was the personnel technician and the health and safety coordinator. I see the personnel technician, it looks like it has been filled.
Yes,
Health and safety coordinator, what's going on with
it's
that?
currently vacant and the budget has a deferred hiring date of July 1st.
July 1st of 2023.
Yes.
Can you talk to me quick? I know that when the prior deputy mayor talked about this position, it was actually, we talked about it quite a bit. She had talked about a pandemic safety plan that this position was supposed to be in charge of, et cetera. And also workplace violence. I'm looking at my notes from last year. And we deferred hiring last year, I believe. But it's stating that, was that completed, the pandemic safety plan and all that?
I can check in on that.
Okay, thanks.
I think we had several as the pandemic moved forward and then vaccines came out and there were constant changes from the federal government agency. Anyway.
Oh, CDC.
Yeah, CDC, I'm sorry. As new guidance came out, that position, that person interpreted that guidance and put directives out and put information out. And as the pandemic has entered a different phase now, it's not as necessary, although CDC is constantly updating things and we're still trying to get information out. But yes, it was very instrumental in the early days of this past year.
May I ask, would that position, if not filled next year, do you think, honestly, we could probably do without it and it could be divvied up? Andy?
I think it would be hard to divvy up, just because understanding the workload of the individuals in the office now. It would slip, it wouldn't get the attention it needs.
Councilmember Gully?
Personnel does handle our timekeeping, am I correct? Our hourly time.
Comptroller's office does.
Oh, you do? Okay,
yeah.
well, then that wouldn't apply. I thought that maybe when we start going to a more automated system and we come out of the Stone Age, that we might be able to cut back on some of the labor hours involved in each one of these departments to maybe create some openings for others in those departments to maybe look at these spots and not have to, bring in other individuals, but excel them into a different position that they'll have experience with the people around them, which might be a little softer transition. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens if we ever get to where we're supposed to be.
It's on the top of the list now that the
That's a
budget's
big
out.
list.
It is a big list.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Andy. And I think if no other questions, we can move on. Awesome. Nice job. We will
Thank you,
now
Andy.
move to the city clerk's office. Maria, you could stay right there. Did you see the face there? That was good.
Be careful.
The mayor will lose weight by that. See that?
Bring those cookies right over here.
All right. City clerk, we are
Page 42.
43. Yes, 42. Sorry. We're almost done. Hang in there. Councilmember Figueroa, how you doing? Hello?
All good.
Good. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. I do want to let the council know, I truly apologize. Andy and I had a miscommunication. What you're going to see in the current budget, for instance, office supplies, 1250. Back when the city clerk was asked to develop the budget, the city clerk based it on a very minor increase. However, each department has taken a 0.05% decrease in each line unless it's absolutely justifiable, i.e. postage. So stating that, the city clerk's office will do as the other departments, unless obviously, your postage, it does look like your current budget, 1,500. Well, we could probably keep that at 1,500, and then if needed, we'll do a budget amendment. So that is my suggestion, and so I did relay it. So I think that that's prudent. Okay, but Maria, take it away. And how is everything going on in the clerk's office? And also, real quick, the consultant services, I know Andy bumped that up and he could explain that, or Maria, in terms of the Humane Society.
Yeah, so the Humane Society is contractual. I believe it goes up for next year, it's 99,405. And then we do have Capital District vet bills that come in as well. They range anywhere from like $3,000 to $5,000 per year. So that's why it's at 105. And one other thing I wanted to touch on was my assistant city clerk. So as you know, my office on a daily basis, there are 3 of us plus the auditor. She doesn't, she's not in our day to day, but I am looking to ask for an increase for her salary. Currently she's at 32,107. And, you know, to align with everybody else's 4%, she's going to 33,391. You know, my office is consistently busy every single day. Phone calls, emails, people showing up at our window. You know, I need my team every single day, and they go extremely above and beyond any expectations that I could ever set forth for them. Both of them do. And, you know, if you look, I'm sure you've already looked at all these other account clerk and similar jobs that are in City Hall. My assistant city clerk, she is nowhere near those salaries, not even close. So you know, it's an important job. She helps a lot. Like I said, goes above and beyond. She definitely comes up with new, more efficient ways to do things in the clerk's office. You know, when we first started back in January, we did have a little bit of help. You know, Mara was here for a little while, helped us how to, you know, showed us how to do some things. And ever since then, we've been on our own. You know, we figure out a lot of it on our own. And, you know, other people do help me as help us as we go along. But a lot of it we've had to figure out ourselves. And let me tell you, we wouldn't be as successful as we are without all of the whole team together. So
What's your ask?
what'd you say?
What is your ask
$5,000, please.
on top of the
Yes.
33,391? We will discuss. If you could follow up, Maria, with a memo.
Oh, yeah, and also, I'm sorry, excuse me.
It's okay.
I did talk to Chris Millen as well. He is in agreement with this. He is in,
He's up to.
yep, he's the UPSU president, I think. Is that his?
Yes.
Okay. So I've talked to him. He's in agreement of this. He supports it. So that as well.
If you could follow up with a memo to the council, I think that'd be helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
And anything else in the budget? I think that pretty much covers city clerk, and we'll make amendments when the time comes to do that 0.05 decrease in the lines. And then the city council office, which I know Councilmember Gully has asked me to give him the floor
Numerous.
in terms of our budget overall. Bear with me. It's page 16. Yes, 16. I am going back. Page 16, you'll see the lines. Once again, printing and advertising, and the other lines minus obviously the consultant services, which is our auditor, Bonadio. And that is not increasing, correct, Andy? They're under a 3-year?
They're under a 3-year contract. The next year is the last year of it. I'm being a little, that is his contractual amount. He did note, as Alan noted, I'm just passing along the message. At the management letter comment about leases, I have heard from contacts I have that have gone through that lease thing. It is accounting wise absolutely horrific, and I have heard that there are other accounting firms that are coming in with change orders to their contracts for significant amount of money.
Really?
Yes. So we're going to try to do as much of it as we can in-house before it gets to them to head that off. I will give Bonadio a lot of credit. They've always been absolute first rate when it comes to providing help and guidance when it comes to accounting and auditing. I just talked to him the other day for help with something. But I just wanted to make you aware of that now, that what is going on in the accounting world, which was done after they put in their RFP. That happened after the last RFP went out. just to forewarn you now. We'll do as much of it as we can in-house though.
We appreciate it. And once again, the lines, we will take the decrease as other departments has, and that will be amended also. Okay, that was a miscommunication. Everything else is pretty much status quo. You'll see the NIP, the CRC matches our NIP program, which we will go after again in 2023 accordingly. And now I will just hand it to Councilmember Gully, who requested to speak regarding the council's budget.
I've been on the council now almost 7 years. And in the first 4 years, we had 9 members, 2 full city members that picked up a lot of the extra additional calls from constituents and residents throughout the city. The last 3 years, there's been 7 of us, and it's been an extreme amount of additional work upon each one of us. And most of us have jobs during the day that we work. We diligently put a lot of time in at night and in the evening and weekends on our position. I don't believe the council members have had a raise since, I don't know God's when, but it was way before me, I believe. Andy, would you have that number? Was it 2011, 2010? We're talking 12 years, 11, almost 11 years that council members have come to the table. And like you said, you want to attract decent people. And we want to keep that going. And I think that the members here work very, very hard. I would like to suggest that there be a $5,000 bump for each council member on the council that would equate to taking up the slack from the 2 individuals who were on our payroll 4 years ago and allow us to, it might cover our gas bill from driving around all year. But I just think that the council members deserve it, and they haven't had it in a long time. And while we give raises to all individuals all over the city, I think that it's important to realize that we are residents who come to a part-time position to serve 51,000 people. And most of us work way more than part-time in this position and do our jobs quite a bit. And sometimes I think that it's under-recognized. So I'd like to propose to the council that we consider a raise to the council members that haven't had one in the last 11, 12 years that they've been existing. I've passed a lot of raises. I've never seen anyone say, hey, how about you guys? And I'm saying, how about the council members? They work darn hard for the people of Troy.
Thank you, Councilmember Gully. We will certainly all proposals, take a look at it. I would ask that you follow up with a memo. No.
You write the memo also.
Thank you, Councilmember Gully, Andy, Mayor, fabulous meeting, lot discussed, line by line. I did find the summary of the bands that you provided last year. It's awesome. So anyway, if you need a copy. Yeah, definitely. I just want to say there's several meetings now over the next several weeks with the various departments, and we will continue going line by line and do our due diligence. And then toward the end of November, we will come up with a potential couple of amendments. We'll see where that goes. And I really want to thank the council. Not too bad, going on 3 hours. I think we spent 5 hours last year. We were here, I think, till 11:30. Stating that, a lot going on. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much, Andy. Any other discussion or questions? I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Everybody. Is there a second? Okay, Councilmember Soriento, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Bye, Councilmember Figueroa.